Well, hi.
Hey.
Did you wear your New York Ripper shirt?
I did. This is the putrid
Oh,
one.
no kidding.
Yeah.
Wow, that certainly qualifies. So are you representing tonight? Is that it?
Oh my God. How do you do it? How does he do it, folks?
Dude, you should edit in like a rim shot, or like a ding, like
Every
a
time we
counter.
get another amazing Ian pun,
I don't want to encourage this, but I appreciate your
encourage
support.
yourself.
Yes. I can't be stopped. So now that we've got the T-shirt out of the way, that's great. So it just brings us right into Accademia Giallo. It seems like we just got together to talk about an Italian horror thriller, and now we're back talking about another one, The New York Ripper, from 1982, directed by Lucio Fulci. I forgot to bring my shower cap because I definitely had to clean up after watching this movie.
Is this your first Fulci, Ian?
I've seen Zombie,
Okay.
and I want to say I've seen some other. Did he do House by the Cemetery?
He sure did.
Yeah, and yeah, I think I've seen a few Fulci movies. I'm blanking on them, but they've been the zombie films. What was his trilogy that he did?
Well, he did Zombie, The Beyond, House by the Cemetery, and Gates of Hell.
Yes, I've seen all of those.
Well, there you go. You've seen some Fulci.
Yeah, and I think I was thrown because I've seen Fulci, but I've never seen Fulci like this.
What he has.
And damn it, I don't think I've seen a movie quite this depraved in a long time. I mean, in talking about, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say I love that email exchange where it's like, you remember you picked this one.
I thought I was ready. I had no idea. Because honestly, we've talked about, with the Argento series and even some movies in the Accademia that we've been discussing, the sort of the exploitative aspects of it, the really funky attitudes towards women. This one, frankly, takes the cake, and I think I'm gonna need like a spoiler / trigger warning from you guys next time. If there's something that, let me just ask you, is there something that tops this? And when I mean tops, I mean probably bottoms, because this was really low stuff.
Well, I will begin by saying I almost like, so when I saw that email thread, I was like, should I send like a warning? Should I like, because this one, I feel it wouldn't have been my next pick for the direction that we're sort of navigating towards, but
we have direction. Nobody told me we had direction.
I just feel like, with the previous films that we saw, we didn't really, take a detour into like Sleazeville or whatever. This is like the detour right here. So like for me, when I saw that Ian picked it, I was like, okay, well, let me see, like, if after, in hindsight, like he's like, oh, I'm glad I picked this one, or like which direction this kind of navigates it. Because now it's like, God, there are sleazier films. There's a couple in particular that I'm thinking about right now that just like if you think this is like the limit, like it just goes even further, But I will say, like, the Giallo is not known really for being, I guess, like this grimy. It's usually, the filter is always a pretty one. It's always an interesting soundtrack. There's always like just some real elegance to the whole, like, thing. Whereas this one is just like that early 80s grimy cop show kind of feel. It's got that New York thing that I was talking to AC about when we watched Nighthawks. It's got that same kind of grimy vibe to it, the New York dirtiness,
And I picked up on this, that Nighthawks is on the theater marquee.
It's on the marquee.
Scenes. Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah. Little tie-in.
Bryan,
Yeah.
I would be remiss, and I think all the young gore hounds out there who are taking notes, what would you say are the sleazier ends of the pool beyond this one?
Oh man, like
It sounded like you had a few in mind.
well, Giallo a Venezia, Venice and Giallo and
Okay.
Venice. I'm sorry, long day. That one like just it gets real crazy. You know, a lot of like okay, so it's like okay, where do we start with this film? Because I'm trying, like, so there's that scene where you know the bottle is thrust into a certain area on the female's body, right? In New York Ripper, stuff like that happens in like in Giallo in Venice. There's a really disturbing one in Strip Nude for Your Killer. There is like I really wish that we saw this one before this one, but What Have You Done to Solange?
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a real like oh my like it just kind of puts you off, but it sets that tone for the entire film. You know what I mean?
And those, I mean, but I feel like those are moments. But in terms of like overall, in terms of overall tone, I feel like this really is kind of the sleaziest, the grimiest. Would you agree? I mean, I feel like there's some standout moments in the ones that you're citing.
Sister of Ursula. Have you ever seen that one?
I've not.
That one is like it takes a lot of grimy, you know, just departures or whatever. But no, like yeah. Oh, the one. Did you let me borrow that one? There's the hell's that one? It's actually a neo Giallo. It came out much later.
Oh, sure. Which one? Were you thinking Francesca? Not Francesca.
No, not Francesca. It was done earlier. God, I hate when like we record one of these and it's like
Yep.
I that's like the note that I should have put in here. Last Caress. Last
Right.
Caress.
Yes. Yeah.
I think you're the one that let me borrow that one like years
That's
ago.
German though, right?
It's German, but it's like.
But it's totally styled. It's its whole Giallo style. Yeah.
Yeah, and it does like I don't know. It's weird. It's like to call this one truly sleazy. I don't know. It just kind of takes away from it because plot wise, there's a lot of like really bleak moments, like emotionally bleak moments that you don't necessarily get from something that's really sleazy. You know what I mean? That's why
I don't mean to. I mean, yes, I'm saying it's sleazy because I'm calling that a qualifier, but I'm not necessarily saying that's a demerit.
Okay.
Because I mean, it certainly is the flavor of the film. Now, whether you want to judge that as a positive or a negative, that's I think up to the viewer. But yeah, I mean, because I totally agree, and yes, we should probably actually dive into the film proper. But
and I feel like the recording starts now.
I feel like this one has a lot of good things going for it in terms of narrative, in terms of I mean, there's some great suspense sequences. So I think to merely, and that's why I was kind of putting that qualifier in there, is that I don't think to dismiss it out of hand because it's a sleazy film does the film justice. Ian, this was your first viewing of it, so I mean, obviously, yes, I think that was my first impression as well. It was like, dang, this was like dirty, and I don't feel, you know, I feel like I've really been through something. But having watched it a few times, I think similar to Last House on the Left and I Spit on Your Grave, the more the initial shock wears off and you start to kind of appreciate there is some craft going on here, and there is some morality going on here. And I feel like to dismiss it out of hand simply because tonally it's off-putting, I think is unfair.
Yeah, and especially because like some people actually, they'll click on one of these things and they'll be like, oh, sleazy, never mind, I'm gonna move on or whatever. You know, like I think there's much more depth to it. You know, like it's got that tonal thing to it, but God, like I would be. I'm searching my mind for something that I've seen like on this sort of Fulci level, but with, like you said, a lot of emotional, you know, depth to it, a lot of like oh, the motivator for this individual is this, you know what I mean? Like it's up there in terms of the Fulci career or whatever. In terms, like my favorite, I'll say right now, my favorite Fulci Giallo has always been Lizard in a Woman's Skin.
Mm-hmm.
Only because it just takes so many, like, you to compare Lizard in a Woman's Skin to something like Zombie, it's like, wow, this is the same like filmmaker. It's crazy, you know. But this one, it's up on the list because it delivers all that gore stuff. It delivers all that, you know, that almost Maniac-esque 80s New York grimy feel. But it also makes you think. It also, like, you know, like, I've seen this a number of times. The first time I ever watched it was the early 2000s. I saw the Anchor Bay version, the DVD that came out, and I was put off. Like, maybe I'm like sitting here like Ian right now, but I was just totally turned off because it was like, man, there's nothing redeeming about this movie. Like, it ends off on a very bleak, sad note, you know what I mean? But the more it sunk in my mind much more, you know what I mean? So it left a lasting impression. So later, when like the Blue Underground Blu-ray came out and I finally purchased that one, I rediscovered it, and it was more like, oh shit, this is actually like a really it's got a lot of stuff that makes you, like, you know, like for the opening scene when the dog fetches the fucking severed hand, for Christ's sake, you know, it's like it sets that tone, but it's just so much more. Like, it delves into so much. Like, Ian, like, your first impression, like, where on the spectrum do you land with this one?
I think this movie's on the spectrum, all right, but no, no, I, it's hard for me to judge because I watched it late this afternoon. I learned a very valuable lesson. Do not watch the New York Ripper 20 minutes before you eat home-cooked meatloaf.
Oh boy.
Honestly, I took that first bite.
Actually.
Yeah. I took that first bite and I nearly gagged. Like, I was sitting around on the couch with the family. We were finishing an episode of Paw Patrol. So I figured, you know, what better way to cleanse the palate than like cartoon dogs saving the world. And I took meatloaf. I nearly threw up because this movie was in my consciousness.
Yeah.
I probably do need to see it again. And I think we're going to have to, maybe I can put a graphic up or something, because I do need you guys to walk me through the spoilers of this plot, because I didn't understand it. I think it just came flying so far out of left field for me, on top of the fact that I was watching this late in what was a very long day following a night of very little sleep, that the sleaze, I think, struck out because it was so much of a punctuation to so many different scenes. Because literally that scene with the broken glass bottle being shoved into the woman's private parts, I'm trying to keep it clean here for the YouTubes. It's shocking because it does happen instantly. And usually you see that kind of a thing happening to someone's stomach, like a knife will come out and stab them in the stomach. This is going downtown, and it's graphic.
Literally.
Yes. Yeah. There's a lot of, you know, more so than anything outside of, I think, porn, there's more female underparts that are being played with and toed, not fingered, toed. And that's why I really struggle with this, because there's a lot that I can see Fulci maybe trying to sell that New York underworld sleaze and doing it very well. But at a certain point, when the lady walks into the sex show and she sits down and she's watching two people on stage live having sex, she's the only woman in the audience. This guy comes and sits down next to her. He's watching her. She's like fondling a tape recorder and then fondling herself. At a certain point, I wonder, is this the kind of movie that's made for the people who are sitting in the audience with her, or is this serving some kind of a grander purpose? Because it also is followed by a scene of extreme violence toward a, you know, mostly naked, vulnerable woman. And I don't know where after having watched it just once all the way through, I don't know that the, you know, the sort of tender family subplot, I guess motivation towards the end that we find out, is quite enough for me to carry this and say, yeah, that's justified. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Okay. I mean, I would say, I mean, Fulci is this is 1982. So Fulci is deliberately trying to outdo. I really feel like he's already had a lot of success with kind of the gore quartet, the gore-tet, as it were.
There you go. You're getting it.
I'm catching on. And I think that is what he's going for here, is that he sees the slasher move on the rise, and he's like, okay, you want a slasher movie? I will show you what a slasher movie can be. And I think he also is, he's almost sending it up. It's almost on a cartoonish level, and I think that's the disconnect for me now, having seen it a few times. Is that it is almost ridiculous, in the same way that the Gore-tet is ridiculous. Like none of that feels real. This feels more real than those films, in that the violence is very very human, but it's so grimy. It's so dirty. It's so perverse.
Over the top.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I think he is having a laugh. I think he is almost poking fun at the seamier side of New York. He's like, this is a cartoon version of what the 42nd Street of New York is, or what we perceive it to be, especially coming from another country. It's like we've seen, oh, New York, 42nd Street. Okay, that's what this is on steroids.
I guess my inner tipper gore is coming out here, because I understand what you're getting at, especially with the motif of the killer. He's literally using like a Donald Duck voice to call the cops and tease them about where his next, attack is going to happen. And even when he lunges out at people and attacks them, is like, I'm not going to do it because I'm going to strain my voice. But I guess my question is, Fulci's on that wavelength. But the end result, I feel like you really have to step back and and make a case for this one, because I don't know if aside from the ridiculousness of the killer's voice and the over-the-top graphic nature of the kills, going back to that 42nd Street porno theater scene, there's nothing campy about the way that scene is presented. Is presented in a very disturbed but very authentic way, where you see these two people on stage having graphic sex with each other, and then the woman getting off stage, and then it's almost like that weird morality play of like, you have sex, you get killed. I don't know. I just can't. Maybe it's because I've seen a lot more modern films that are much more on the nose about their satirical intent or their commentary, and when they're sending something up, that I just didn't recognize it here. And I'm fully willing to say, maybe it just passed me by.
I don't think he's sending it up. I do think he's inflating it for artistic purposes. He is making it as, if we're going to do a sex, if you're going to go to a live sex show, I'm going to show you a live sex show where people are actually having sex on stage. But I think your point of the ridiculousness of the killer's voice is a cue. That, like, how can you take this seriously?
I can take it seriously when there's this Donald Duck voice, which the first couple of times I hear, I'm like, oh, that's funny. That's cool. But then to see, like, if you took that out of the scene, you're still left with women begging for their lives and being horrifically butchered. And so to add that voice onto it, it's almost like, well, does adding a laugh track to a snuff film make it funny?
It doesn't make it funny, but I think it does show a degree of self-awareness.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I'm playing devil's advocate on this thing too.
No, and I'm
No, but
wait, who's the devil's advocate here? I think
Keanu Reeves. No. Or was that Pacino? I can't remember.
He was the devil himself. So spoiler.
Oh, I never saw that coming. Anyway, Bryan, you were saying.
No, but I was gonna say, so I think this one is definitely going to open you up to, if we go back to, like, say something like Lizard in a Woman's Skin, or if we go back to like a Sergio Martino film. It's going to make you look at all the all the colors of this, like, you know, genre in a new light, I think. Like, because this one, if you think about it, it's all that in your face. It's that sort of unrelenting, you know, the duck quack, the look of the film. It's just really stripped down. It's almost like Tenebrae in terms of the muted colors, until you get into the sex club, and then you have that like gorgeous like lighting in there or whatever. And it's like, to me, it's probably the grisliest murder scene in the whole film, you know, even though there's certain like really gory stuff a little bit later. But I think this one just sort of sheds all that stuff, and it gives you that gore that Fulci was working on. And like Aaron said, it filters it through that, I don't know if it's necessarily like an Italian perspective, because this is how an Italian sees, you know, early 80s New York at the time. And, you know, I don't know if like, I've never been, like, I think I might have been 10 or not 8, I'm sorry, when this movie came out. So I didn't get to experience all that stuff from the, you know, the grimy 80s or whatever on that level. But we had something up in Boston called the Combat Zone around that time when I was growing up in Boston. And it was very like, you know, whenever we would walk by, you would catch little glimpses of it here and there. And you would see like, you know, like porno studio marquees or theater marquees. You'd see just, you know, liquor stores and things like that. And, you know, from afar, it's like, man, that's the one area of Boston that seems dirty. So I could just imagine, like, you know, down in New York City around that time. But it gives you that sort of embellished prism of like New York and what it, you know, what this filmmaker deemed it to look like or whatever. So you got to take that in mind when you're watching this film, and then you're comparing it to some of the other Gialli that, you know, we're going to watch and that we've seen. I think maybe Fulci's like mental deterioration was like taking place also. Like, he's had a lot of tragedies in his own personal life. And like he's dealt with a lot of you know, like I think when you look at his broad filmography towards the end, like it just gets really bonkers, you know what I mean? And I think this is sort of the beginning of that phase of his career, you know. So it's like, it's almost like Don't Give a Fuck Fulci is like beyond this film. You know what I mean? Because like, if you consider the beyond, if you consider, you know, House by the Cemetery and things like that, you know, he's working on a different level. Like, yeah, it's gory and all that stuff, but it's like, it's so much different from anything that you've seen before, like in the Friday the 13th movies or whatever, 80s, like gore-tastic kind of films or whatever. This just seems like a different vibe, you know, like a different vibe to all that gore. And then this feels like what Aaron said, just a different vibe of like the 80s slasher filtered to that like early 80s cop show, like, you know, filter or whatever.
It also feels very different from any of the Gialli that we've talked about.
Oh yeah.
The most notable difference to me was in all those films, even Bay of Blood, we were dealing with adults, and there was like a conspiracy among adults. There are adults in this movie, but they're very isolated. It's like the beleaguered cop who's on the trail of this killer, and he's got like a psychologist friend or something who's kind of helping him track him down when he's not playing his electronic chessboard. But it seemed, yeah, cop show is a very good way of putting it. And I guess I just missed that kind of genteel conspiracy among the, you know, the like the art gallery owners from Blood and Black Lace, and
yep.
You know, anything with Edwige Fenech in it that we've talked about.
Yeah, there's no inheritance drama going on here.
No.
Right. And so I think that's it, just like you know, from All the Colors of the Dark, which we talked about last time, which was, you know, Aaron and I were debating, like, is this more of a cult supernatural sort of film rather than a giallo? I felt kind of like that with this, because it felt more slasher than giallo to me. I can understand how the intricate bonkers explanation for what's going on coming in at the very end could maybe qualify it, but that's almost not enough for me. The killer was not wearing, well, we never really see what he's wearing. We see like close-ups of like the white or the flesh-colored latex glove as it's wielding the knife. But yeah, I want to get, whatever we talk about next month, we got to get back to our black-clad killers. I miss it.
I got a few in mind, so don't worry.
All right.
But no, like, yeah, but to me, it's like, it's Fulci taking like his Giallo sensibilities and plugging into, like, you know, what was popular back then was the 80s slashers or whatever. So he's taking that aesthetic and applying it to, you know, the early 80s kind of vibe. Because like if you look at something like Tenebrae, it's almost looked at as one of the proto slashers or whatever of the time. Or I mean, the slashers were already coming out by the time, or whatever. But it's very slasher centric, you know, if that's even a word. But
it is now. I think it's a hyphenate. Yeah.
And both films actually came out the same year.
That's right. 82. Right.
Oh.
So
forgot that.
So I don't know. I think it's got, you know, like the sound. I fucking love the soundtrack to this film. I don't know, like, to me it just feels very, like, it's got all the red herrings, it's got a lot of the POV scenes in it that you'll see like in a lot of these Giallo films. It's got a glove killer in it, very mysterious, you know, serial killer, and it's got a body count and things like that. So I think it, you know, to me it's, I mean, there's another film that came out a few years later called Stage Fright, from Michele Soavi, that people often, you know, like classify that as a slasher, you know, because it's got a lot of true slasher sensibility to it. But it's like, it's set in like a very, you know, artistic background to it. And so like people often kind of have it sort of skating the two lines of like slasher and Giallo, whatever, where I do look at this one as more of a Giallo, because I think it's Fulci applying his Giallo sensibilities to a slasher and then making it some sort of a hybrid or whatever, you know. So
yep. And you've got those two very stylized scenes, the one being the aftermath of the bottle murder, where you've got that frame, you know, the framing of the red doorway in that green, the green wash. And then you've also got the theater sequence where Faye is pursued by the killer in the theater. And I mean, that's, I was listening to I had the subtitles on so I could actually hear what was supposedly happening on the screen. And I want to see that movie, because that movie that Faye stumbles into, that movie's insane. Yeah. That is anyway. But I mean, you get to see Fulci going, hey, I can do pretty too.
Right.
But then he goes back the other way. So I kind of love that he shows you what he's capable of, and then goes, and I'm still going to do this instead. So, you know, I mean, like you kind of said, I love the fuck it all Fulci, you know, it's like, that's kind of where he is. And this is kind of like his last real significant film. I would,
because
I mean, because you got Devil's Honey, you got Enigma, but I mean, and Cat in the Brain. I mean, but those are, I feel like those are always, you have to kind of qualify them if you say you're a fan.
Yeah. I mean, Manhattan Baby, I think, is right after this. And then he does Murder Rock is still the fucking favorite of mine. I'll die in the hell for that movie. I don't even care.
Would you say it's a good movie though?
I mean,
okay.
It's all about taste.
No. Thank you, Your Honor. No further questions.
So you mentioned this is his last kind of big film. Is that because of that decline you alluded to, Bryan?
Yeah, I mean, he was like, I don't know if he was significantly declining in health during this time, but I forget when he passed away in the 90s, right? The early 90s or something like that. Yeah, it's just like, I think he was, you know, I've read things about where he's like, his sanity sort of slips away from him. and his competency as a filmmaker later on, like he gets really sloppy. You know, you could tell there's an artist in there, but like, I don't know, humanity doesn't treat him as well as he, you know, used to, or whatever. So it's like like there's reports from like some of his later films where like the assistant director was pretty much doing the whole thing, and you know, things like that. But this one, I don't know. Like, I think it's like what AC was saying, where like he's just like, you know, I don't necessarily think this is like fuck it all Fulci in terms of quality or whatever. Like, I think this is fuck it all Fulci. Like, I'm gonna just, you know, show whatever I want to here. And if this character is a nympho that seeks out like something that her husband, who has this open marriage, like, you know, is, you know, open to or whatever, then that's what this is what these characters are going to live as, you know what I mean? So I respect them for that. I think it's like a double-edged sword in this movie, where it's like some of the gripes that I have are the shit that just doesn't make sense. Like, you know, the quacking and like, you, like, as a sane film goer, you're sitting there like, what the hell is going on here, you know? But it also, for me, it makes it interesting. It makes it like, wow, this is a film that I've never seen before. You know, it's characters that I've never seen before. The cop, like, if you were to put in Tom Selleck from that time in this role, it's like, it's a totally different movie. But it's like, I can relate to this guy whose back is like, you know, killing him or whatever, you know, like he's very tired and just, you know, on his last legs or whatever. And he's still able to get somebody like Kitty, you know, so that blows my mind.
That's the cop's salary, frankly.
Well, yeah.
And I should mention like, that she is the character's an actual prostitute. I'm not.
No, right.
But even that is, it's fascinating because I don't think we find out that she's a prostitute until he gets the phone call. We just see him waking up or getting a phone call when he's in bed with this woman. Is like, wait, is that his wife? Wow, what's going on there? And it turns out, like, no, that's not his wife.
And to be fair, like, to, you know, to hop on that point, like when I first watched it, like the way that when she's introduced and, you know, waking up together or whatever, and then she goes about, like, you know, like she lives there, like she knows, you know, she fixes herself something to whatever,
cereal,
eat or
I think,
whatever.
yeah.
So it's like
eating cereal in the nude.
You know, right? Like it's, to me, I was like, well, that's not a prostitute, you know, like she knows him, and like, but it's like it's implied that that's like a regular of hers or whatever, you know. So yeah. I don't know, but I think it's interesting. I think it's just like another dynamic that probably wouldn't be in another movie of this nature, you know, the cop trying to find a killer or whatever, you know.
And that's another thing where, again, I'm conflicted, because on the one hand, you can look at it and say, okay, she gets out of bed while the cop is taking this creepy phone call. She goes and makes herself some cereal, and as she comes back, yeah, she's completely naked, and, you know, you're maybe concentrating on the cereal bowl. That could be seen as exploitative. But on the other hand, if he's going for this kind of gritty New York realism, yeah, I mean, they've done this 1,000 times probably. She's just like, I'm just gonna get up and get some cereal. I'm not gonna bother putting on a robe for you. There's no modesty here. So yeah, I can't fault him for that choice.
Yeah, and I love little details like that. I love, you know, in my own brain, I have like my own version of the movie Demons, for example, or whatever, you know. So this is where people take a shot out there.
I just took a drink. This is coffee. I'll pretend it's whiskey.
But I like those little touches in these movies. It gives them much more depth. You know, like you said, it's like she knows the layout of this place, and she's just going to make herself comfortable. It's an added thing to an otherwise like pretty standard killer calls hero, and, you know, now hero has to determine what's going on or whatever. You know, it's very, you've seen that in a lot of other movies, but the way that it's played out, the way that Fulci makes his films, it's like, to me, it's just like, it's brilliant, because he puts in those little things, those little quirks of these particular, you know, we spend goddamn 10 minutes like in that pool hall or whatever, with the toe scene that you alluded to, like we don't need to be there, but, you know, Fulci's like, no, yeah, we need to be there.
This is important.
But why is that important? I mean, if the movie was centering on that weird marriage of this side character, I could understand it. But I mean, the camera angles, the last camera angle,
God.
because it's the woman from the porno theater. Just to set this up, she goes into a pool hall and she sits down, and she's with these 2 or 3 guys who are kind of putting the moves on her, and the one guy takes off his shoe and sticks his foot across the table and sticks
which I might add is the nastiest looking toe I've ever seen put on film.
No, that's not, you don't want that anywhere.
No. But I swear the last angle is before the table gets ripped away, is from the floor looking up. You see, I swear the foot is ankle deep, like you can't see anything. And she's aroused by it. She's kind of put off, but also kind of turned on. So I'm like, okay, whose perspective is this scene coming from in this particular movie? Whose fantasy is this?
Insert scene here, like for YouTube.
Yes. But actually, let's detour a bit, because I said we'd get into some spoilers here, because I need some help in many regards, but specifically with
Dr. AC.
Movie. Yes,
I am on the case.
Cool.
How may I help you, sir?
Okay, so the big reveal is that there is a girl in a plastic bubble. She's a W amputee because she's got some kind of a, I don't know if it's a blood disease or what they mentioned it. And I forgot.
It's a lymphatic disorder.
Okay, so she's, I was going to say on her last legs, but she's on her way out.
Wow.
I seriously.
I think you might need to say she's on her last legs. I think that is what has to be said now.
Oh my God.
Just give her a hand.
Oh no.
Aaron. Very offended.
I'm so sorry.
You are no longer board certified, sir. Okay, so it turns out that the one lady that we've been following since about the middle of the movie is a character, Faye. Yeah,
Faye who survives one of the attacks. She's the only one who survived an attack by the Ripper thus far.
Now let's talk about that. Did she survive? Well, yeah, I guess she did, because the Greek guy that we're kind of following, the one from the porno theater, as I understand it, he was working with the Ripper to procure or to set up victims and get them sort of into place so that the Ripper could come and finish them off. Is that right?
That is the assumption that the psychologist comes to, yes.
Okay. So because he encounters Faye on the train, and then she leaves, and so a few minutes later, I don't know if they had walkie-talkies or what, because I don't know how the Ripper found her. It seemed like an ingenious stroke of luck, unless
he was on the train as well. We don't know.
Or I was wondering if, well, no, it would make sense, because it turns out that the Ripper is Faye's boyfriend. Right. So
spoilers.
Yes, we are firmly in spoiler territory. I will put this on a little graphic.
Peter's the killer.
Yes. Is that his name? So I guess Peter went insane because he has a daughter, and I guess an estranged wife, because in the whole, like, we're going to do the psycho explanation where we explain the entire killer's motivation after everything's kind of wrapped up, for the dummies in the house like me who have no idea what's going on.
No, but like in a film like this, it's like there's so many plot points injected. Like, I mean,
and it really is an information dump right at the end. It's like, you got one parent living in Brazil and the other one, you're like, what? Oh, who? What? So you are not to be derided for not picking up on that.
Well, thank you. I feel much better now. You've been reinstated, good doctor.
Thank you.
But no, so he had a wife and a daughter. I guess the daughter got sick and the family didn't last, but he's been paying for her medical care, and at the same time he's been tracking down and horrifically murdering attractive young women, because here's where you guys come in.
Okay, because his daughter will never grow up to be a beautiful woman, because his daughter is going to die of this disease before she has a chance to mature. And so that's the explanation, whether it's a good one or not, but I mean, that is the explanation that's offered. And the duck connection is because there's a little duck that they would use to talk to each other to help make her smile through her pain and her kind of disconnect.
Right. I picked up on that much. This movie sort of, especially towards the end, reminded me a little bit of Saw, in that you've got a killer who's kind of upset at people who are squandering the gift of life that this person no longer has, and also Seven, oddly enough, with the gritty New York cops on the trail of a serial killer. The difference is in Seven, we only, the kind of the gimmick of that film is we only see the aftermath of the killings. We don't see the gore that leads up to it. But so I'm wondering if Fincher was at all inspired by this movie, or if he cop to it at all. But yeah, so I guess the motivation seems kind of weak, except if you just say, well, he snapped, he went crazy with grief and all that. I guess I can accept that, but the connective thread doesn't seem quite as smart as some of the gialli that we've talked about before.
100% agree. I absolutely. I mean, that, like you say, that's the explanation that's offered, but I think it is a bit contrived. But I think, like, again, the raison d'etre for this one is these murder sequences, and each one of them is very memorable. There's not a dud in the bunch. From the one where the dog shows up with the hand in its mouth. And
the freeze frame, and that's the opening credits.
We're just going to watch that the whole time.
And then the music kicks in. It's perfect.
And you got another bicycling, instead of bicycling to the airport like Peter does in Tenebrae, she bicycles to the ferry.
That's going on the bingo card, by the way.
And bicycling. And I think her, her murder is pretty extraordinary.
Oh yeah.
Help me out with that one too, because she's on a ferry.
Right.
There's a red bug convertible. It's that whole like Friday the 13th kind of like killer POV thing where she's like, oh, hey, how's it going? And then all of a sudden things go south. But she's killed in this car that's on this ferry. But then a few minutes later, there's people in the other cars driving off. Did everyone get out of their cars except she snuck onto it? Did I miss something there? Because it seemed like everything was abandoned, and then it wasn't.
I mean, usually, not a lot of, I don't know, this is my extensive ferry experience, but I don't think a lot of people stay in their cars for the ferry ride. They get out and, watch from the railing. And yeah, I don't think anybody else is in the cars. And then, which is why she goes down there to vandalize his car, because she knows it's going to be deserted. What I think is hilarious is like, the car isn't moving. So like the guy behind him just like smashing him, like, get out of the way. Like nobody notices there's a dead person because it's important that I get out of this ferry right now.
As you do,
As you do, Also, I don't know that it's quite that easy to push a car, if it's in park. I don't think you can just like bump into it. It's going to just roll along.
Well, as she was flailing and dying, she shifted it back into
there you
neutral.
Go. Okay, see? Thank you. You've justified it.
But no, I think
it's a brilliant movie.
Well, I think maybe it was just I'm not going to call it a mistake, but just an edit issue where if they had shown people getting back into their cars or something, because it literally looks like the place is deserted and then all of a sudden the cars are all moving forward. Like what happened here?
Right,
because, especially because she's out of the car, she's hanging out of and she's screaming, conveniently timed to the horns of the ship. And that was really cool. I just wondered, is there nobody around here? Are there people here? What's going on?
I could totally see Fulci being like, oh, I don't care about that shit.
Yeah,
like,
right. Who cares? Do you see the gore and the blood that's exploding out of this woman?
Everybody's going to know that there's a time lapse in here somewhere.
Right.
We just need to get to the gore right now.
Yes. The thing that will probably haunt me to my dying day even though I could see that it was fake and I intellectually knew it was fake, but something about it struck me as very real. The bisected nipple with the razor blade. Oh,
yeah.
my
That's
God.
the one.
Yeah.
That will that will stay with you.
And even more than the eyeball, strangely enough.
Yeah.
I'm going to reveal something on this show right here to you guys, to you fine gentlemen.
Nothing criminal.
Should we stop this camera?
No, this is like Patreon material, so you're getting this stuff for free.
Now I have to start a Patreon. Thank you.
But no, like this is like super harmless. But like when I was young, really, really young, I had this nightmare that I had a severed nipple in my mouth, right? And it just disturbed me. This is a nightmare. This is
disturbing me.
I didn't dream this up. Well,
if I pay the Patreon, will you stop the story?
But like ever since, there's a scene. What's that movie? What's that movie with the little kid that looks like he's much older?
Bob?
Children of the Corn?
No. And he bites his.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh man, we're gonna lose our.
I know. Our cred is right out the fucking window. But no,
his name's Bob, right?
Yeah,
no, it's not Bob.
Yeah. Well.
Anyway, continue. I'll vamp and.
I want to say Burial Ground, but.
I think it is Burial Ground.
Anyway. That movie has nipple damage to it, and in any movie like that's always been it's something where I just look away or whatever. And this still does, even though like you can tell it's very much like a prosthetic or whatever, practical effects. Like it just still, to me, it's like, oh, I gotta look away. Like I can't watch this whole thing or whatever.
Michael's his name, and it was Burial Ground. Yes.
Okay, Michael. Yeah.
Sorry, everybody.
Were you projecting that, or are you trying to tell a secret?
Bob, somebody else. Yeah, that's a secret. This is a secret. Don't see anything.
But no, yeah, like the eye trauma also puts it into Giallo territory or whatever, or Italian.
Well,
territory.
puts it into Fulci territory for sure.
Right. But yeah, all that stuff. It's just very like, I'm gonna set the camera here, and you're gonna get a descriptive view of what the killer's doing, kind of thing, you know.
Oh. I love the Peter was his name, the killer.
Yep.
Of course, he pops up at the end after Faye has dealt some bad damage to him. But then when the cops show up, and it's a great bit of a quick shot of a wonderful prosthetic where he gets the hole blown right through the cheek, like his face explodes.
Yeah.
It's gorgeous stuff.
Yeah.
And I also like the fact that he committed to the bit. Like he was quacking away to the very end. There was no like killer monologue or anything like that. He was one personality, and then he was the other. I do want to talk about the very end of this picture, which, you know, now that I'm softening on the movie as we speak about it.
Yeah, I could feel that. Like on my side of the camera, I could totally feel it.
But I got to say, this is something that it's the knife in the heart of anybody who's sensitive watching this, is the little girl calling her dead father on the phone for that last bit of connection, because it's all she has. She's on her way out of this world. She just wants to talk to her daddy, completely oblivious to what he's been doing, I think.
Yep.
But that, you know, that phone call is never going to get answered. I'm like, that is sadistic. That's really wrong.
And that's
also cool, you know.
But that's what I'm saying. That's the beautiful touch about this film. Like I don't know if beautiful is the right word, right? But I feel like that's such an important touch to this film and what makes it what it is, because you don't get stuff like that in something else. You know, it's a very heartbreaking, emotional moment. That's why I always have a hard time calling this like a straight grimy whatever kind of film, because like you leave that movie now with like, oh my God, like I am so broken, but it's not because of the murder or whatever, it's because of this poor girl, you know.
Well, and to back up from that, I mean, I think in watching it again today, I was really kind of impressed at the misdirect, because right up until the end, we don't know if it's Peter or if it's Faye.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
You know, like Faye makes a duck phone call.
Great point. Yeah.
And you're like, whoa, what to, you know? So I mean, I mean, I really like that sense of we don't know which one of them it is, because we've been told that Faye is prone to hallucinations. We've already seen her kind of like have this vision of Peter killing her. So I mean, like, it really keeps kind of tipping back and forth, and I do enjoy that quite a bit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think the emotion, I mean, I think that's Lucio Fulci standing back and like going, what would be like the meanest thing I could do right now? I'm going to bring a nearly limbless, young woman into this, and I'm going to have like tears rolling down her face as she calls for her. And you're just like, are you kidding me? And that's what I mean. Like, it's almost too much that you almost can't take it seriously. You're like, wow, you're just going for the gold here.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why I've been able to kind of because I had the same reaction you did, Ian. When I first watched it, I was like, that was just mean and awful. But I think he's aware of what he's doing, and therefore I can stand back and like go, oh, you knew what you were doing.
And Fulci has a notorious reputation of, like, when he did signings like towards the end, the twilight years of his career or whatever, if like a fan was like, oh, can you sign this here or whatever, he would like flip it over and sign on the back or whatever. Like, he's very just like, almost like a dick, but whatever. Like,
not even almost.
But I could see him doing something like in a more storyteller fashion of like, this is how I'm gonna end this movie. I'm gonna have people like brokenhearted at the very end.
Yep. Yeah. Because how often are you emotionally? I mean, really, it's the killer's death equals catharsis.
Yeah.
Like, that is the formula. And in this case, like, the killer's death means that suddenly a child is orphaned.
Right.
And it shows the emotional fallout from that.
Because like, why do you not like this movie, Ian?
I really, what's going on over there?
It happened again.
No Edwidge either. So.
I do like this movie. I just got some weird feelings about it that I got to sort out, probably with another viewing in a couple of years. But no, I'm going back to Saw, because I think in some of the sequels, I can't remember which one, there were some children in danger, and like the adults had made some bad decisions that led to them getting killed, and the children, I think, left behind or something like that. So there are some kind of parallels and more contemporary cinema that I've seen. I was picking up on a bit of that, but whereas those were kind of the commercial Lionsgate, they were hardcore graphic violence, there were still mainstream kind of things. This one is very much you've spent an hour and a half down in the sleaze, and here's the final kick in the teeth. Thanks for your $3.50 or whatever it was. But yeah, I mean, I can't say I enjoyed the movie. I respect it. I thought it was really cool. But whatever we do next month, if I throw anything out and you're like, oh no, that's pretty much New York Ripper 2.
you don't.
I will gladly watch another Edwige Fenech movie.
I do feel like this is a step that needs to be taken, and and knowing that you've seen other Fulci films, I think this does have an interesting place within his canon.
Absolutely.
I kind of am excited to see how you respond to Lizard in a Woman's Skin and Don't Torture a Duckling, because it shows an artist who's not so nihilistic, and has a little more compassion for his characters, but yeah, I mean, I just feel like this is kind of a side of Fulci that I think deserves to be seen.
Absolutely. Yeah, totally agreement. And like I was gonna say, like, sometimes it's like you need this shift to kind of move on to something else, and then like going back, like, maybe a couple of years when you do revisit this movie, like you'll see it with new eyes and you'll appreciate it more for what it's attempting to do and what it's using and things like that.
Or not. Because you might just still hate it, which is totally fine.
Well, no, I don't hate it. And that's the thing is like, I can't remember where Suspiria was in our class on Argento. But
I feel like it was very early.
I feel like it was early, but I don't know if it was the first thing. Like didn't we do a couple and then we watched Suspiria?
I feel like we did Deep Red and Suspiria
Dracula
up front. Yeah,
we didn't do Dracula 3D together.
Still have not done Dracula 3D. Argento's school is still open.
Yeah.
I want to be in on that.
Oh, please, the more the merrier.
All right. Done. But no, because looking back on Suspiria now, which famously, that was one of the reasons I wanted to do that course with you, is because I saw Suspiria. I didn't get it at all, and I thought it was a bad movie. But now having context, or having gained context at that time to get in on his wavelength and understand what he was doing in that movie, it's kind of like watching a film with subtitles for the first time. You know, that old argument, I don't want to read while I'm watching a movie. This is dumb. And then he gets to a point where watching movies without subtitles is kind of boring, you know? Yeah. So, New York Ripper, I got what I asked for. But I feel a lot better about it now, having talked to you fine gentlemen. So thank you.
Anytime. My pleasure. Our pleasure.
All right. Well, we'll catch up on something next month, and I look forward to that. So thank you guys, and take care.
You too. Love. Ciao.
Ciao.